So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'd like to first welcome everyone to the May Lens webinar series. My name is Stephanie Bowers, and I'm the Human Rights Coordinator and Equity Director at the City of Iowa City. And it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today. Sarika, thank you for joining us, and I will hand things over to you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and good morning. I hope everyone is doing well. Stephanie, I'm going to ask you, can you see my screen okay here?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. And Stephanie, thank you. And thank you to the City of Iowa City for allowing me to be part of your Lens webinar series. My name is Sarika Bhakta, and this topic that we're going to delve into is something that's near and dear to my heart. And being born in India and then coming to the United States, I was 19 months old when I came to the States. And this was when it was in the late 80s, before technology. So I want to set up a little bit of framework and the lens in terms of where I am approaching a very challenging, a very highly sensitive topic when it comes to the caste system. And specifically for the next hour, we're going to delve into the Indian caste system and looking at how is it coming into the US and looking at it from the cross-cultural exploration. As any initiatives around diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and engagement, sometimes we know that there are going to be extreme divisive perspectives and different stakeholders. At the same time, if we know that there are inequities that are permeating, what are we doing as change agents within our organizations, within our own communities, so that we're ensuring that equality is being felt, and that also means addressing inequities in order to get to the equality. So as we start going into the hour here, the agenda that we're going to be covering is looking at what is a caste system, looking at also the practice of untouchability, the theories on origin of caste, as there is a vast number of origins, and then looking at the Indian caste system in the US, prevalence, laws, and policies that may have been enacted in the US, and then exploring strategies that you may consider as you look at what does it mean for your own organization, what does it mean for your own community or region. And so I look forward to delving into each and every one of this. If you have questions, I'm not sure how you're able to ask questions, but there will be contact information for me. I look forward to engaging with you even after this session as well. So if you have any questions, jot them down, as I would love to be able to engage with you further. So what is the caste system? And when I talk about the Indian caste system, I want you to be thinking about, when we think about in the US, that there's many caste systems that are out there. And as we look at how does it permeate potentially into the US to be able to have a broader scope. But as we look at the Indian caste system, it's really a social hierarchical stratification system that, as you look at it, is traditionally based on an individual's birth, which historically really determines their social status, occupation, relationships. And you're going to see different colorations here. And the reason why is that when you look at the social stratifications, it impacts their various, status, including, access to healthcare, access to even legal protection, influence on political power, in terms of impact on economics, whether you can own land or not. And so the origin of the caste system is highly debated, folks. I think this is one of the things that if you have any key takeaways is that caste system is extremely complex, and there are many, many different perspectives, different theories in terms of how it came about, but some scholars do trace it back to the emergence of around 1500 BCE with the Indo-Aryans. And while others consider earlier roots that the caste system took in place, and then you have some folks that think that later influences were more significant in terms of how this social stratification came about. So I'm just going to go through the levels here, folks. So at the top, we have Brahmins. Historically, they are considered to be the highest of the caste and are primarily associated with being priests and gurus and are really looking at the scholarly study of sacred text. So priests are also known as pandits or pujaris, and traditionally they're involved in religious rituals, ceremonies, worship, and key temple duties. Gurus are also known as spiritual teachers. So think of them as mentors in the Indian tradition, guiding individuals towards enlightenment. So Brahmins are revered in the traditional society because they help, look at the deep knowledge of sacred scriptures and their expertise, establish them as key spiritual guides. Hence, they had immense influence. They also obviously had immense influence with all of the other caste denominations that you see here from the structure. So Brahmins, you can see, would also be engaging with the next group, Kshatriyas. So they're the kings, the rulers, warriors. So it's not unheard of that the Brahmins would also engage in dialogue with this next stakeholder group in the caste system when it comes to how do we rule the land. And when you're thinking about what their role is, because again, this is all occupation driven, traditionally their responsibilities related to governance, administration, and military. So their role is really, being able to keep peace, keep the law and order in society and governing society, and of course, leading in times of war. So now you go to the next level of Vaishyas. Think commerce, folks, okay? So merchants, traders, farmers, artisans, they were primarily involved, again, as I said, in commerce and agriculture, and they played a key role in terms of the economic activities. So thinking about ensuring the production, distribution, and trade of goods, products, and services was key. And when you're thinking about these various, groups, they were all over India. So it's not as if they were predominantly in one region or another per se, but they were all over. Again, the occupations defined what they did from a role perspective. Shudras are the fourth level according to this blue, and I'll explain what the differentiation, the color is, but their primary functions or as laborers. So they worked in the fields such as in agriculture, construction, and various forms of manual labor. Their role again was crucial for the functioning of society as they provided essential services that supported the daily needs and the economic activities of the community. So think about our society now and think about how the stratification occurred back then. And again, I say back then, yet it is still permeates in the day-to-day lives. So now we're going to go to the next level here. Dalits, formerly also known as untouchables. They had various roles in the Indian society, including street and sewage cleaners, looking at human and animal waste removers, cremation, burial handlers. It's, before we do talk about Dalits, it's important to know that there are many theories of the origins of the caste system, and we'll go into it in another slide in this session. But regardless of if they were part of the caste, so some theories believe that only the blue was part of the four-part caste system, and others theories believe that the green and the blue was part of the overarching caste system. So in some theories, Dalits are recognized as part of the official caste system structure, and others they were not. And it's vital to remember that regardless if they were in the structure or not, that they were part of society and an integral part in terms of what they did. At the same time, they were also extremely marginalized. Just look at the various roles and occupations across the various, structures, and you can see that, what they did was critical when you think about what we need from what they did and they still do, it's critical for us to be able to ensure that our communities are safe and clean. Yet they weren't regarded as, in the traditional four-part Varna system of the Hindu Varna system. That's what the blue one is a four-part Hindu Varna system. And that included the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, but they were not recognized in their structure. Um, I would also say when you look at the next group here, Adivasis. They are not considered as part of the traditional caste system at all, folks. However, they are a distinct ethnic groups native to various regions across India, and they had unique cultures and languages. And the reason why they're not part of any type of a caste system, they were still part of society. Yet, when you look at this structure, I look at the Dalits, you look at the Adivasis, that looking at who was marginalized, who was not considered part of the society in the way when you think about the influence, the status, the privilege. And so when you're thinking about discrimination, in what ways does it show up, or did it show up, and what impact did it have in relationships, and what did it mean for families, what did it mean in the workforce, and what did it mean to drive the community and the economy? I want to kind of pause here. When growing up here in America, uh, my parents and I would have conversations about the caste system. And when they would tell me that we were in the Vaishyas, so, my family in India, they owned a farm. So we were in the Vaishyas category. But then they would tell me that what group we would be in. So what they meant was what community or what subcaste, also known as jatis. Within all of these structures, there are thousands and thousands of subcaste. So just take a second and wrap your head around that within all of these, there were subcaste as well. So what does that mean from a hierarchy perspective? That within the individual caste, you also had various subcaste? And what did it mean from all of the things that you see on the right side, from your social status, relationships, marriage, education? What influence did you have on the political aspect to influence change, etc.? And so wanted to tell you that growing up, one of the things that my parents and I remember, this was way before technology. My parents came to America. My dad maybe spoke a little bit of English. My mom didn't speak any English. High school was the farthest that my dad ever got in India. My mom flunked in ninth grade, came to America. I was about 19 months old with my 2.5-year-old sister. And when we did come to America, we were in San Francisco, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and in many other places, especially in Oklahoma, Nebraska, and then here in Illinois, eventually, when I did stay here for the longest time, we were probably one of the first Indian families. So when it comes from a diversity perspective, it was pretty inherent from a visible diversity perspective. So we ended up in the Quad Cities, which is half in the Illinois side, half in the Iowa side. And the Mississippi River divides the Quad Cities. So it's about 3 hours, I would say, south of Chicago. So in the early 80s, we were one of the first Indian families. And we were also, I should say that in India, imagine like the States, you have Gujarat. Gujarat is a state in India. And if someone was Gujarati, their last names you probably would recognize: Patels, Shahs, Desais, Modi, Gandhi. Well, those are all last names were Gujaratis from the state of Gujarat. My last name is Bhakta. And so I always say for people to have an understanding, it's almost like a spin-off of a Patel, because we, also known as Patels. And so in Quad Cities, we were also the only Bhakta family initially. And then over time, we had additional family members, that came. And growing up, when it came to relationships, because marriage is a big institution, it's a big deal, it's a big moneymaker too, but it also solidifies families, folks, right? And so growing up, my parents would always say, "Lagn karana hai to niyat માં લગ્ન કરવાનું છે." And then I was speaking in Gujarati. So to translate, basically what my parents would always tell us is that you have to marry within your own caste, your own community. And so remember I said the caste is Vaishyas, but there's a lot of subcaste. Well, my subcaste was Bhakta. That was my community. That meant that my parents wanted me to marry someone with the same last name as me, a Bhakta. Now, Quad Cities, there weren't that many Bhaktas. Everyone that was there were related to me, so that was not going to happen, right? So after I graduated from high school, I went to University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. I was really excited. I thought, okay, bigger Indian community. I will be able to, be able to meet folks potentially for a marriage prospect. Turned out, guess what, folks? There was only one Bhakta on the whole campus. Me, myself, and I. So of course, I started to have conversations with my parents because they would come to me all the time with marriage prospects. Freshman year, I kid you not, they said, "We have a Bhakta boy that we want you to meet for marriage." And I asked my parents, "Well, why do you want me to go to college if you want to marry me off? Because you want education to look good on my marriage biodata?" It's like a resume for marriage, a biodata. And they said, "No, you can get, educated and go to college after you get married." Keep in mind that me and my sister and my brothers were going to be the first one from our family to be the first generation to go to college. So I didn't get married at that time. I did graduate, and eventually I did marry. I did marry a Bhakta. So I can't go more into detail because that's a story for another day. But as you can see, that when you're looking at the immigrant journey, and especially those from the Indian, community, the South Asian community, that you're going to see that even the immigrant journey, that even if you're here in the US, you have practices around the caste system that are still in an existence. This has happened to me in my lifetime. And so that is a reason why we are here having these conversations, folks. So untouchability, regardless of, so untouchability goes to the Dalits, who were formerly known as, untouchables. So regardless of their position, whether they were in the caste system of the four-part Varna Hindu system, or if they were, part of another theory that was a larger part, they were always, were seen as being untouchable, meaning that they were seen as being impure based on what they did. And so that whole untouchability concept, it was very complex because they faced severe restrictions and were denied civil rights and social participation that were afforded to other groups. And so when you think about untouchability, it's because they were considered so low in the social hierarchy that their touch or even their presence, was believed to be able to defile somebody, or it polluted the area that they were around them, or members of higher caste. And so this, concept and this practice was deeply rooted in notion of ritual purity and also impurity within the caste system. And so as you look through some of the practice of discrimination that, showed up in, the Indian society, it's important for us to understand how that came about, because in order for us to even talk about what is happening here in the US, we need to have a context of ways and signs that it showed up. So when you're thinking about, in villages and towns, physically being, separated in your own area, being able to have access to, common water resources, when you're thinking about, temples and other places of worship, how even entry into these sacred places, were denied entry, especially because, faith and, religion is a strong values of folks in India. And so when I look through every area that it permeates, thinking about, I'm going to look at the occupational restrictions to menial and degrading jobs. So I'm going to give you an example here. If you remember the hierarchy structure, it talked about some of the jobs that they did and they still do. So manual scavenging, it is something that is banned, it is outlawed, but despite it being banned, you still have the members of, some of the lower castes that are still doing manual scavenging. Think about, it's illegal practice of being able to manually clean and handle human, waste from dry latrines in open drains and in sewers, and they're not getting the protective equipment to do it in a safe, hygienic manner. And so again, those are the things that you think about what they historically were doing. It is still permeating, even though it is illegal. The opposition and or violence to inter-caste relationships and marriage. So think about being disowned or violence is occurring. There's also, killings that occur that if you look at wanting to be in a relationship or a marriage that is outside of your caste, there is a such thing called honor killings that do occur as well. And as I mentioned earlier, marriage is a very revered, process and institution in India because it's not only bringing people together, but it's bringing families together. And when you're thinking about dating, sometimes that's not even something that's talked about, but marriages, relationships, going into another caste, big stigma at times, a taboo. And when you're thinking about, there's also sometimes even when you're looking at double standards, because if you have someone from the higher caste that is a male and then is in a relationship with someone that is in a lower caste, it's still frowned upon at times. And again, I'm not trying to stereotype here. These are examples that we've seen and have heard, and it still continues. But if it's a man from a higher caste in a relationship with a woman from a lower caste, could be still frowned upon, yet it could be accepted over time. Yet if it's the opposite, if it's a man from a lower caste and a relationship with someone from an upper caste, that may not be viewed as, highly as well. Then, of course, when you're thinking about the political and economic exclusion, think about all the power and the influence and resources that can be gained from it. And so again, these were practices that discrimination that showed up in signs in society. And when you're thinking about individuals that were in the lower caste, what kind of a psychological safe environments were created or are created for them to be able to speak up, etc. And so I wanted to really kind of delve into what experiences were for some of the most, marginalized, caste, the lower caste, including Dalits and the Adivasis.
And Sarika, there is a question in the chat. There's a few actually. Could you marry someone from a different ethnicity, or what happens if you do is one question. The other question is, were these placements assigned at some point historically, or did they evolve?
Yes, thank you so much, Stephanie, for pointing it out and the question. And thank you, Brandon and Donalda. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. Thank you all for the questions. So feel free to, split them in. And Stephanie, yes, feel free to interject and let me know. So could you marry someone from a different ethnicity, or what happens if you do? Well, let me say that, times are changing, times have been changing, and yet you still see folks that feel as if they have it's like the social stigma with families sometimes, like log kya kahenge, which translates into what will people think. So it's always like that social mindset of what are people going to think. You married outside of your caste, you married someone with a different ethnicity. So I guess it all goes back to your family, and it also depends on whether or not they still adhere to these traditional practices. So Brandon, they could, and it all depends on the family if they are okay, they're accepting, and I always go back to the contact theory. I don't know if you all know what contact theory is. Contact theory is the more you engage and interact with people from different backgrounds, biases come down, right? And so I would say that the perspectives are definitely shifting, Brandon, in terms of, being able to marry outside of your ethnicity, marrying out of your subcaste, marrying out of your caste. Yet you're still going to have some, families that are very conservative and very traditional that they're not going to. You've had individuals that were disowned by their family and they will go and marry. We're seeing also folks marrying outside of the Indian nationality. And so I hope that answers your question. Again, it depends on who you are, where you are. There's a lot of different multi-dimensions of an individual beyond just a caste, also your gender, also your faith and religion. There's a lot another session we can do on Hindus and relationships with the Muslim. Now that's another big contentious one as well. So there's so many aspects of someone's multidimensional identity that depending on where it is, you may be looking at several complex navigations for the individuals that are involved as well as a family structure. Were these placements assigned at some point historically or did it evolve? Now, that is another one that's really great question. And we'll go into some of the other theories so we can go into it. But people have different perspectives and opinions in terms of that as well. That some felt that it was, birth. And I'll go into it. Let me see if I can just go into it right now and I'll come back to this one, just because I don't want to hold off on it. Okay, so answering to that question, so historical theories of origin of the caste system in India. So as you can see on this slide, I've seen upwards of 30 different origins of theory, folks. So I'm just giving you a slice of it. That's how complex it is, just because folks aren't aligned in terms of where did it all evolve. We don't know when it started, let alone the evolution of it. So even within the religious theory, there are, different perspectives, what folks believe. So some feel that it is rooted in the ancient Hindu scriptures that, really help to describe today's society that basically established a divine social order. So the key word there is divine social order. And in this four-part Hindu Varna system, this is where the Dalits were not recognized. Some also believe, so remember, as I said, it establishes a divine social order. Now, where it goes to your question, were they assigned at some point historically or did it evolve? Some believe that various religious texts extends these concepts by linking one's caste to, give me one second, to their duties. So basically their dharma. Remember how everything was linked by their occupation? So not only the occupation, but also your past actions. So your karma. And based on all that, through reincarnation, which your soul will continue to perpetuate until it gets to a pure soul, until it becomes one with Brahma, the overarching, that this kind of solidified the caste system in terms of people's lifetimes, if they believe in the reincarnation, as well as generations into the family. So again, it's nuanced because not everybody believes those sub-bullets, some do. And then historically, yes, it has definitely evolved. And some look at maybe the racial theory, where they felt that the British colonial administrators, when they came, they distinguished and originated different levels between the Indo-Aryans, the migrants that came in, as well as the indigenous folks, the Dravidians. They looked at features, they looked at occupations, etc. Some felt that it was more political and economically driven, that it was a tool for resources for control and to maintain social order and to be able to maintain power by those that were in the upper caste, which are your Brahmins and your Kshatriyas, your rulers, your administrators and warriors. And then some feel that it's more of a functional theory, that it was a way to be able to divide up labor and responsibilities. And then some felt that it's a cultural theory. It's all based on local traditions, cultural adaptations, and that's what continues to perpetuate caste. Some is a blend of it, all of them. Each of these theories, you have folks that will give you 5, 10 things that they feel do not conform with that and they don't believe in. And I think this is why it is such a challenging, complex type of a system to say, yes, that it is a religious thing. And that's what you're going to hear and see. what some folks are fearing here in the US. So I'm glad you brought up that question. I hope that answers your question, but it is evolving as perspectives change. And also when it comes to the religious theory, you're going to have folks that also say, well, was the original scriptures misinterpreted? Did they not read it right? Or was that what the intentions was? So whatever may have been interpreted, gosh, centuries ago, was it misinterpreted? And then why is, a certain religion like Hinduism being blamed for that if it was misinterpreted? Well, now we maybe know better, etc. And so that's how why it's also evolving. So great questions, folks. All right, let me see if I can go back to the previous slide here. All right. Okay. I wanted to go to this slide because very important that in 1950, the Indian Constitution was passed and adopted, which included several articles that in essence made caste-based discrimination illegal, as well as the practice of untouchability. It was abolished. And at the same time, it's critical to note this, that the government also designated various scheduled categories. They wanted to formally recognize some of the marginalized groups over history that have been marginalized, like the Dalits and the Adivasis. So Dalits and other, caste members, they were categorized as scheduled caste. There was also a government designated category for scheduled tribes, which is for Adivasis and other groups that fit into this category. Why is this important when they adopted the Indian Constitution back in 1950? Is that this was a way for them to enact targeted, policies aimed at combating discrimination to ensure that these communities, receive more of an equity, to create more of an equitable level playing field by looking at special protections, benefits in education, government employment, political representation. Yes, some will call it affirmative action. Again, they're looking at how do we help create equity with so much that has happened with some of these groups that have been marginalized for centuries. And again, is to help uplift them socially and economically. The goal was to be able to rectify historic injustices and help them integrate, more fully into the mainstream of the Indian society, but in a very civil and respectful manner. And so contemporary views, and disputes, continue, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago. There are diverse opinions about, the caste system. You're going to have critics of the caste system and also for people that are reformers, that could be activists, scholars, political leaders, or any other leaders. They feel that it's very outdated. It's a very oppressive social structure. And so why do we continue to believe in it? Because it's only going to continue to perpetuate the inequities. So they're pushing for more of a equal society where opportunities are not determined by birth. Then, as I mentioned earlier, you still also have groups that are still, traditional and, are conservative, and they feel that they want to uphold the caste system as this important aspect to their own identity, one's way of life, their cultural way of living, and it's a social organization. So overall, while the traditional basis of the caste system is widely acknowledged, because we acknowledge that it existed and it's here, yet the modern interpretation of what it is, whether or not people accept it or not, even with laws in place, folks, right? Because it is illegal and in practice of untouchability is abolished, yet these practices still persist in varying degrees. Hence, you're looking at evolving perspectives that are based on exposure, lived experiences, media, where they live and who they interact with. And so that, again, goes back to the contact theory, who they interact with, and how is the treatment, so forth. All right. So we staying on time here, folks. So that's good. So the Indian caste system in the U.S., I want to, when you're thinking about the prevalence in the US, there are some, notions out there that it's not as prevalent. Why are we talking about it? Or what's the justification for it? It is an emerging topic of discussion, especially as you think about the Indian diaspora that's growing. Basically, Indian diaspora just means folks that are coming from their homeland and going and dispersing to other parts of the world. And in this case, as we're talking about, is the US, but you can have the Indian diaspora in other parts of the world as well, because the caste system is global. And that Indian diaspora may continue to, have, this discrimination based on where they go. And when you're thinking about the Indian diaspora, the size and scope and influence, especially in the US, it's one of the fastest growing ethnic groups in the US. And the population exceeds 4 million as we speak. And when I think about any kind of diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and engagement initiatives, I'm always saying, look at your data, look at your changing demographics. As leaders within our organizations and the communities that we're trying to enhance the quality of life, we always want to be thinking about not just what's happening now, but 5, 10, 15. What is the data telling us? What impact does it have? We also know there's an increase in immigration, right? And that's another highly contentious issue. The reality is that when you're thinking about the Indian, population, you're looking at the South, the South Asian community, it is one of the largest group, even from the immigration perspective. And so I look at what is contributing to the growth in the US. Immigration is one, but you're also looking at high levels of education and professional skills amongst the Indian immigrants. Think about the 1950 law in India that, discriminates, that has an anti-discrimination law, and all the proactive policies that put into place to help enhance education level for those that are in the lower caste or the tribes. So that means that over time, you're also going to see individuals of lower caste that are also getting those opportunities to, get, higher education in India. And so what does that mean when you're thinking about the US is like, you think about industry sectors like technology, healthcare, academia, because that's what we're seeing here in the US. Some of those institutions, because they're also looking at, where are some of the highly, skilled professionals tapping into some of the, population in India. And again, with Dalits and the lower, tribes over the years being able to get more, access to education, you're also seeing more of the migration. Now, that's another thing. When you look at some of this data, and I know there's a lot on this slide here, I'll try to break it down here. Sometimes they say that, some of the surveys are not, representative of, the entire, Indian diaspora. The reality is those who migrated here to the US, folks, who do you think had the means and the resources and the financial, pathways to be able to come to the United States? If you looked at the traditional hierarchy, it's going to be more of your upper caste over time, right? I told you my parents didn't come until the 80s here. And I think my dad said he had a few bucks in his pocket, right? And so as you start, and you saw where we were in that sector, but we were also landowners. We owned farm. So you have some group that came earlier, and now as there's a reason why it may be more of an emerging topic now of caste in the US, because the later waves of the immigration groups are changing. That also includes maybe higher levels of those that are Dalits and Adivasis and others in the lower caste that were traditionally the lower caste or the tribes. And so something to be thinking about when you think about the data, etc. The Cisco lawsuit, I think is one thing. It was a landmark legal challenge. And the reason why is because it was one of the first time in history, or actually the first time in history, that caste-based discrimination was at the center of a case against a American multinational corporation. I mean, think about Cisco. It's a big name, a global player in the technology industry, right? So it's global. So of course it catches the attention of not just in what's happening in the US, but globally around the world. And the case was an alleged employment discrimination and harassment against a Dalit employee by two supervisors, both members of a higher caste. Some of the allegations were lower pay, belittling the individual in front of other employees, being isolated from the rest of the employees. Um, to date, it was the California Civil Rights Department that brought the alleged, case against Cisco. Back then, they were called the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. Now they're known as the California Civil Rights Department. So to date, the case against the supervisors, the California Civil Rights Department has dismissed it, yet the litigation against Cisco is still ongoing. And so it's something that has brought significant attention to the issue of caste discrimination in the US workforce and is spurring broader conversations about caste equity. As you can see, there's diverse perspectives, prevalence, we're getting into it now. Equality Labs, they did a survey back in 2018. This was probably one of the first of its kind, based on 1,500 South Asian Americans, and it highlighted, according to their report, they said there was significant caste-based discriminations, felt by lower castes across the Indian diaspora, regardless of where it says work, education, business, religion in the community. So one of the things about this survey is that it's indicating that it is across the Indian diaspora at work. And why I'm pointing this out is because that's something that others who are not agreeing with what their report is saying, it comes down to, well, is it across the entire Indian diaspora or is it not? I just want to share a little bit of what their data has, shown through their own survey. When it came to the workforce, we talked about employment discrimination in terms of pay inequities, but they also had individuals that reported being passed up for promotions and facing biases in the hiring process. Reports of verbal abuse, bullying, and ostracization by members or colleagues from the dominant caste. Education, lower caste students faced bullying, social exclusion, and derogatory remarks. Lower expectations from teachers and lack of academic support. Segregation of caste-based segregation in classrooms and social activities. When it comes to healthcare, reports of lower caste individuals receiving substandard care or being treated with less respect by healthcare professionals. Community housing discrimination, reports of difficulty in renting or buying a home due to caste bias from landlords or real estate agents. Public spaces, feeling as if they were being treated unfairly or being denied services in restaurant, stores, or other public spaces. Now, remember I said that where this is permeating a little bit in terms of which industry sectors, tech, healthcare, academia, right? And so some of this is where you're seeing the Equality Labs sharing where they're coming up with some of the discrimination. This is what they are indicating is occurring here in the US. So that's one perspective. Other perspective is that some are questioning, the credibility of the Equality Labs. They feel that it's not representative of the sample. They feel that they because they use non-random sampling methods. They feel there may have been bias in the survey, lacked verification of respondents' caste identities, was geographically concentrated, or didn't undergo a peer review, lack comparative context. I'm just sharing what, different perspectives are saying, so you have an idea of, we talk about assessments when we're looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and engagement initiatives, right? So data, assessments, quality, whether it's qualitative and quantitative. The Carnegie Endowment of on international peace, they did, indicate that, and they recognize that discrimination is happening, as Equality Labs, has stated. Yet they suggested that lower levels of caste identification among Indian Americans may not be as influential across a broader diaspora in the United States. They feel that it reflects, migration and the integration pattern of Indian Americans, particularly those that were born in the U.S., indicating it's a move away from traditional caste practices based, compared to their counterparts. So those that were foreign born versus U.S. born, indicating also a generational shift that as you look at second, third generations of immigrants in the family in the U.S., that they're moving away from the traditional caste practices. So there's some differences in terms of how that survey and assessment was, viewed and looked at. Frankly, I feel that if there are inequities, that needs to be addressed. It also means that you can continue to look at refining your surveys, right, folks? And I think it's important because that's where the debate is going on right now here in the US. Some are advocating for the necessity and scope of looking at, specific anti-discrimination measures or policies, whether at, at the municipality level, or you're looking at within your own institutions and organizations. Also looking at creating caste as a protected class within your own policies, practices, and procedures. Whereas then some others feel that by creating these policies, is it going to create a problem in the US that doesn't exist? That's what some feel. Or do they feel it's going to single out the Hindu community by creating a divisiveness or create an increase in Hindu phobia? If, if folks feel that caste system is related to the religious theory, remember, not everybody agrees with it, or also even whether or not that interpretation of the religious scriptures were accurate back then, let alone how people are interpreting it now. And so, and also some feel that are the current US laws sufficient to address discrimination, including caste? So some have said, well, we have race on the books, we have nationality on the books, we have religion on the books. Race, nationality, religion. Well, again, can't use religion. And again, it's not just the Indian caste, remember, folks, right? Because if you're looking at a law, policy, etc., around caste, it's going to be encompassing of any other caste systems around the world that you may potentially have interactions with that may show up in the workforce or in your community, right? And so those are just some of those, policy and legislative debates that are going on. So,
It's Erica, there is somebody with their hand raised.
oh yes, okay. Let me see. Let me scroll down here, Paul. What
You
is
should
this?
be
Someone
able
put in the
to unmute.
or do you, oh, okay. Is it Rocio? I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. I think you're able to unmute yourself if you're able to, if you have a question.
Sorry, I raised my hand on accident.
You are fine. No worries, no worries. So on this slide, we're looking at where some of the anti-discrimination policies and laws are occurring in the US. And keep in mind, folks, remember the Cisco systems, back in 2020? That I think that it spurred conversations around caste and discrimination, etc. So I have listed here, and this is not an exhaustive list by any way, shape or form, but Apple, when you think about Apple, one of the first US companies to be able to enact it as part of their anti-discrimination policies, and that was back in 2020. That's a big one when you think about from a tech perspective. They updated their general employee conduct policy to explicitly prohibit discrimination. You also have, I'm going to go to the other side here. You have some institutions, colleges and universities. Again, remember tech industry, healthcare industry, academia, higher ed. Hence, I'm not surprised to see some of these on here just because you're going to see a little bit more higher levels. or communities per se, right? So these are just some colleges and universities. You look at, Brandeis University back in 2019, first in the US, but back in 2019, it was before the 2020 of what happened with Cisco. So you're seeing colleges and universities. You could have other folks that may say, well, the reason why is because there's strong advocacy by certain groups, et cetera, that are going out and doing it. I know that the National Academic Coalition for Caste Equity, they're playing a crucial role in advocating for caste equity across North American higher education institutions. So if folks are advocating, at the end of the day, it's up to the organization, it's up to the communities and cities and the institutions what they want to do about it, right? And so I never discourage awareness and education. Never, ever, ever. I'm also about inclusivity across all stakeholders. That means ensuring that all divergent perspectives are being heard, and at the same time, ensure that psychological safe environments are created to be able to hear from historically marginalized communities. Because that's probably one of the first things when I think about when you're doing assessments, if especially one of the first kinds that you've done that is targeted around and focused on caste system and on the lower caste and tribes. Historically, if they've never been asked their feedback, their input, to be able to speak up, because that's not something that was expected or viewed upon in a kind way. And we also know underreporting happens quite a bit, right? And so those are the things we need to take into stock as you think about policies and laws that you want to enact. So Seattle and Fresno, first cities in the US that enacted laws within their own communities. California was looking at it as a state, but that got vetoed last year by the governor. But again, this just giving you a sample of where policies and laws are being enacted.
And Sarika, there is a question, are these distinctions then set in actual laws in India?
The distinctions in terms of the stratification, because that was outlawed by the 1950 Constitution, but the distinctions of the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes, that is distinct. They created a special designation for those groups. I hope that helps. And if not, please do unmute and let me know or put it in the chat. Oh, here's another question. If individuals of different castes marry, what caste do children belong to in India as well as here? Again, I think this will go back to, values and whether or not people believe in the caste or not, and whether or not they feel like they want to continue to perpetuate that. I can tell you that, as you know, in my case, that subcaste was perpetuated. I will tell you that, do I feel like I belong into it? I don't, because I don't really believe in social stratification. That's just my personal belief. Yet if folks believe in it, I am not going to disagree with them on that. So I think, what caste do children belong to is an individual, family's decision in that aspect of it. I know that as a child, even if my parents think that I'm in that caste, I don't feel that I do belong, because again, I'm not going to continue to feel like it perpetuates that. I don't feel that one's birth dictates your occupation or your level in life. And so again, that's just my personal views, but it can vary. So thank you so much for asking that question. So what are some strategies can you look at exploring for those of you that really create, inclusive environments, or look at strategies around the diversity, equity, inclusion, and engagement? You're going to see some of those very common key best practices to utilize, just because this isn't anything different than any other type of initiative that can be extremely complex, extremely challenging, that you have divergent perspectives and viewpoints on, right? When you're looking at workplace strategies, I'm going to point out a few of them. It's really important to look at, what is your strategic initiatives as an organization? What are your values? At the end of the day, You have organizations that are being proactive, like Apple, that went ahead and put it into their own policies. It's not being dictated by anyone here in the US, yet they are looking at their own workforce. They're looking at it, it is global, but they're also looking at it in the US, in their own backyard, as well as other countries, as well as other castes. And so they put it right in. And I think, the assessments is really critical to do. And if there are some, flaws in the assessment, don't need to throw it away. How can you make it better? How can it be more robust? How can you engage other stakeholders and also understand the various nuances of the stakeholders that are being part of it, right? You'll see, did indicate psychological safety, cultural competency, and inclusive. That has to be the paramount foundation. Remember, psychological safety has to be key in everything that we do, and understand the cultural competency. And again, my beliefs and my views may be different, but I'm always going to be inclusive of anyone. If they're in India and they have a certain perspective, viewpoint of the caste system, or if they're here in the US and they have a different perspective than mine, I am going to respect it. I'm also going to, ensure that we work together so that we can minimize and, ensure that discrimination isn't occurring. What processes do we have in place? But again, it's important to be able to think about your policies, practices, and procedures. Sometimes it's a knee-jerk reaction. We're just going to do it. And then people are like, well, why are we doing it? Engage folks in the process, do audits, and then create them, and then assess. Pilot programs are always a beautiful thing, right? You can trial run it, monitor it, evaluate it, roll it out on a larger scale. But again, it's important to be able to look at, communication and your feedback mechanisms across the board. But if you're hearing even one instance, one complaint, move on it in terms of addressing it, right, folks? We can't let that, not be addressed, and ensure that you're involving folks across the board, ensure you're involved the key stakeholder groups. Community strategies, some of them are tie-in with the workforce strategies. I always say assess your own community, changing demographics of the workforce and the population. I know I've had companies here in backyard of Iowa. That's where I'm here right now. They have shared with me that that one HR from a national company said, I had no idea that we had two, Indian employees, and I found out that they just didn't want to work with each other, or actually the supervisor didn't want to work with the individual. Turned out that it was a caste-related issue, and the supervisor made a comment that if they were in India, I wouldn't have to interact with him. And so these aren't something that are just happening in big communities like LA or Fresno or, Seattle. I'm seeing it here in our own backyard in Iowa, right? I think for me, it's really important to ensure that you are connecting various groups with opposing perspectives to engage in meaningful dialogue. I can't stress this enough, because that is going to be, and it's challenging, right, folks, when you're trying to get people that have different perspectives. Yet if you don't do it, then one is going to feel as if they weren't part of that solution or part of that, strategy, let alone the solution. It's going to take a little bit of time, but it's going to be well worth it, because it's so critical to do so. And I'm going to wrap on the last slide here. Remember multidimensional identity, that people are more than just their caste. They're not defined as caste as their whole identity. And it's important for folks to remember that you're going to have complex layers. You may have caste, you may have gender, you may have religion. And so it's important to be able to be mindful of that. It's also important to remember that as you think about the broad scope of caste, acknowledge caste discrimination is not limited to India or to the US or any religion for that manner, right? So as you start looking at your own, approach, ensure it's comprehensive. Again, I was focused on the Indian caste, but remember, it is broader. And I think the other one, the third one, is also critical too. Be mindful of rising phobias, such as Hindu phobia, which some had concerns that if you're trying to pit us versus them, we're afraid that it's going to increase Hindu phobia, which again can stem from misunderstandings and or, misinterpretations of religious scriptures that, may not sit well with people now, because it was, misinterpretations of what the religious scriptures shared. And again, remember, caste isn't just associated with religion, right? There are different theories out there. So ensure that you combat religious biases alongside caste discrimination. And again, engage with diverse groups when it comes to caste discrimination across all the boards, because we're seeing it play out right now, and there's a reason why. So if we see it, let's try to mitigate it early on. All right, folks, I think I'm wrapped up at 1 o'clock here. And thank you all for your great questions and all of your, insights and feedback. And it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and for you being change agents and continue to ensure there's equity and equality for everyone wherever they are in this world. So thank you. And thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, City of Iowa City, for allowing me to be part of your series here.
Thank you for the informative presentation, and thank you to each of you for attending over your noon hour. There are some questions. I know it is 1 o'clock, but Sarika, if you can stick around, and for those of you that are able to, I'll read off these questions that I see.
Sure.
Let's see. How
Yes.
do people recognize what caste someone belongs to? Is it last name only or something else? And then what happens to caste in cases of adoption? For example, can children be adopted into a new higher, lower caste?
Yes, Kelsey, great questions there. The last names, the surnames, it can be indicative. And I think that's why some folks, when they do use their name, they feel that their name is going to be telltaling for those that may be a little bit more well-versed in the caste system and what surnames belong to which caste. So it can be recognized by name. So that's a great question. What happens to caste in cases of adoption? I think again, they, adopt the children who are adopted get the surnames of whoever their family that they are adopted into. And regardless of which, caste it is. And so those are really great questions, Kelsey. Thank you. If you have anything on that, please, feel free to unmute. I'd be happy to, have a conversation.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Sarika. Very much appreciated. And thank you, everyone. I hope you join us in June when we'll have Sakawas Nobis, who will talk about resisting colonization. That will be over the noon hour on June 13th. So you can visit our website to sign up for that one. So thank you, everyone.